Alright, so this is gonna be part three of is Aquarius a god of the underworld, right? Or the dead man. So pretty much in part two we spoke about, the canopic jar, um certain mythologies from other cultures that Aquarius was related to, I guess, like the dead and the underworld and subterranean chambers, the bottomless pit, and so on, right? And I think before I had left off, I was talking about what could probably or what would actually change if, let's just say, if Aquarius was like redeemed in his natural state, right? So it's like I'm trying to bring him back to life, what I'm saying, with this information, so to speak, or like unveil, like, what Aquarius really is, what he truly is from maybe the beginning, or at least say this lost information. Let's just say that, right? Or hidden information, right? Because it appears that his identity has been hidden. So I'm just like, removing the veil, so to speak. So I'm not going to make this one too long. So these are some of the ones I think I had missed. And I had to basically just dig in my own brain, to try to like remember certain things that I actually read and saved. And I had to go like look for them and stuff like that in my Google storage, whatever. So basically, all right, we were talking about him being a deity of the underworld, or maybe of the dead, right? So, all right, let's go right here, right to the Mazzaroth. So this is supposed to be the Mazzaroth of the Bible, right? The Hebrews and stuff like that, and they start zodiac with Virgo. So number 6, you have Aquarius, man, right? 6 is the number of man. So we all heard about the 666 and the mark of the beast, and they say it's a man and so on, right? So it appears that the man is actually Aquarius. Some people was even trying to do the mathematics of 666 to be, what's that, 216, and they just add the zero. They say that's how many years to our age, and the age to come is the beast, man, and etc. Right. So anyway, you see him as the man right here in the Maseroth, right? So here, I mean, I'm not even gonna lie, but I'm not really trying to name some of these books because I just don't really want nobody like stealing, what I'm saying, and copying, or whatever the case may be. But so anyway, from here, right? This is dealing with the Hebrews, right? With the Bible and astrology and stuff. So, for example, right, it says, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that the imagination of the thought of his heart was only evil continually." Here we have a translation of faulty as it well can be. Corrected, rendered, it will read, "And the Lord Yahweh, not Elohim, saw the wickedness of the man." Then it got IE, which I believe is intelligent example, and it says Aquarius, right? So remember, we're dealing with the Maseroth. Aquarius is number 6. He's the man. Man was created on the 6th day, right? So let me see. It says in the original shows that a particular man is referred to was great in the earth, and that the purpose of his thoughts was only evil every day. Um, it says the meaning of the text is thus clear made. Let me see. It says the Lord, seeing the sun descending in his ecliptic toward the man Aquarius, thought that the man was pulling the sun downward to hell day by day, and of course believed the man's intentions were only evil every day. And indeed, the Lord's fears seemed well grounded, for it would be a shocking thing, according to appearances, should the sun, in his downward course to the bottomless pit, never stop to return to the summer hemisphere again. Then down here it says, the Lord repented that he had made man, or made the man, and so on, right? So, mind you, this is just like, what would you call it? Allegories, right? So this is not to say that the man is actually evil, right? Because we're dealing with the season. So this is what it's basically, you know, so it's like summer is supposed to be good, winter is supposed to be evil, right? They say like the sun is the Lord. They say like the summer is what's that, paradise, and the winter is supposed to be hell or the bottomless pit and all that. So we just read all that, right? And that was explained somewhat. Not as far as like maybe like the evil part, but you know what I'm saying, the bottomless pit in part 2, right? So let's go to some more breakdowns. So here we have a man called Cedar, right? He's supposed to be the god of Saturday. And I guess what's that, Norse mythology and the Anglo-Saxons, right? So let's just get like a quick little recap on who Cedar is real quick, right? So his name is also Croto, example. So it's basically saying here that Croto or Croto formed out of the ancient German word, I guess that's Troti or Croti, whence the modern Groti, a grotto. Croto was the spirit of the caverns, right? And then it says, and particularly worshipped in the north of Thuringia, in the Harz Mountains, where caverns are very numerous. The first propagators of Christianity in Thuringia and the Saxony were particularly hostile to this Croto, causing him to be formally abjured as a devil. Then it says, probably because the new converts from paganism secretly continued to pay adoration to him in those caverns. He was represented under the figure of an old man standing upon a fish to denote his abode in deep places, holding a basket of flowers in his right hand and a wheel in his left hand. So as you can see, Croto, who is supposed to be his Cedar, right? Dwelling in caverns, right? And his abode is basically like deep places, and you can see that the Christians, right, they demonized him and called him the devil. You know what I mean? So we know that Cedar, who is Croto, is Saturday, and we know Saturday is the day of Saturn, right? We know Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius, and so on, right? So we see him with the baskets, we see him stand on top of a fish, right? And this image looked kind of familiar, right? So let's check it out. So here we got the constellation of Aquarius, right? We see him standing on the Pisces Astrinus. The main star is Fomalhaut and the Southern Fish, right? So as you can see, the fish appears to be upside down, right? So I already made a video about who was it again? It was about Egypt. You know, as far as basically the mighty man, right? My theory was that that constellation is actually Pharaoh, and so I was basically talking about, you know, the Narmer fish that's in the hieroglyphs with that Pharaoh of ancient Egypt, right? He was supposed to be the first Pharaoh, and so on. So in Egypt, you know, they have upside down catfishes, or a catfish that can actually turns itself upside down, and then you got the electric catfish, right? So we know that the electric catfish is known to be a Nile fish in Egypt, right? So I already had broke that situation down, whatever, right? But so what would be like the significance, you know, with this fish? Like, or like, what am I trying to like bring up here? So I'm gonna show you something real quick. So I had this file for like a long time, but so it's about like the catfish remedy for gout. You know, it talks about the Narmer fish, the catfish, and so on, right, in Egypt, and it goes down. It says the upside down catfish right here, for example, right, and here, you know, catfish rule the Nile, and so on. Again, it's talking about the Narmer fish, right? Let's see where it says right here. Let's see. However, the earliest and best known historic catfish, and trickily being the spelling rebus for the archaic and ruthless king who gave his name to the catfish, right, is carved in two sides on the slate enamel palette for the conquering king who unified Egypt in 3100 BC. Was notable reason lay behind his adoption of a river catfish as his heraldic animal. Let me see what it says here. Did the subjects detect survival power and feel shudders when Narmer's sacred fish swarm or even walked out of the mud pools into view? Then it says King Narmer and his catfish guys attacking bound captives. So you see the catfish right there with the staff or the rod, right? Then it goes down here talking about how you know, the greedy catfish and so on, right? The electricity from the electric catfish. So the point I'm trying to make here is if Aquarius is actually the mighty man, right? And we spoke about the catfish, and he's still in that area of the underworld, so to speak, right? So when you look at it from a point of view as say like people getting tortured, right, in the underworld, right? We hear things like that, like, yeah, you get to the underworld, you get tortured and so on, right? And you know, certain different cultures, you know, they separate certain things, right? And then we remember when we was talking about the Chinese constellations in part two when it came to like the acts as far as executions, right? And we know those constellations and the stars of Aquarius was next to the graveyard, right? The desolate place, the void, and all of that, right? And remember, it coincided with the underworld and so on and so on. Um, we also know that Aquarius too is like the king of swords, right? He brings like justice, you know, with his own hands and stuff like that. Um, we also know there's a violent side, right? So we can actually see the violent side of King Narmer, right? His catfish. We see the southern fish on the bottom of Aquarius' foot, and so on, right? So it's just basically letting me know, like, um, there might be a such thing as, punishment. You know what I'm saying? In this, in the spirit realm, because I know for a fact, Aquarians could get violent. You know what I'm saying? In the physical. You know what I'm saying? And there's a deity that we had brought up where it was seeming another deity from the Chinese constellations, which is a few stars in Aquarius, right? His name is Seeming. We know that he's supposed to be a deity that governs like life and death, and I believe punishment, right? So let's like read that over real quick, right? First, let's go to the asterisms, right? The Chinese, right? These are the stars and stuff that's in well, the first three, right? Which is the emptiness. We know that's the void. We know that's the place where the funerals and stuff, was being held. Then you got defied judge of life, palm to punish the sin, or the ghost of God. Then you got defied judge of rank. This is Aquarius / Pegasus. Palm to give the rank or the god of life. Right. So here we see a punishment theme here. So remember the executions. So this is the five judge. So I think the Seeming asterism, I believe, is in this area, right? So let's check it out real quick. So we got the Seeming deity, right? It basically says refers to a Chinese deity of the five functionary of that title who makes final adjustments to human fate, with various English translations such as the master of fate, controller of fate, defied judge of life, arbiter of fate, director of allotted lifespans, and director of destinies. Seeming is both an abstract deity or the title thereof and a celestial asterism. So right here in the second paragraph it says, as an asterism or apparent stellar constellation, Seeming is associated with the Wing Chang Wang star pattern near the Big Dipper in what is more or less Aquarius, right? So it goes on, like, we already read about, he's in control of lifespans and destinies and control of fates and so on, right? So again, lumping all of this in together, right? It appears that, there's more, let's say, characteristics and attributes for Aquarius as far as being either, an underworld deity or a deity in the shadow realm, right? The unseen, you know, the realm of the dead, right? So as you can see, right, the functions, I'm not going to say that it fluctuates to like different types of functions, but it all appears to be like the same as even as far as the King Narmer, right? If you want to like mold him into like these other cultures and like just to like put it all together, right? As you can see, he was supposed to be in the form of a fish, right, and beating the captives and so on, right? So he was just basically it was just like telling us that he punishes like his victims. That's what it's basically saying, right? In a nutshell, right? So let's see what else is going on, right? Maybe with the fish. Let's continue with the fish real quick. So this is a copy of the zodiac that was found in the temple of Dendera, right on the ceiling. And I believe they must have took it and they must have brought it to, I think, Britain. It's in the museum in Britain, I believe now. I think it's Britain. I'm not too sure, whatever. But so anyway, right. So we got Aquarius right here, right? Who's supposed to be happy, right? The Nile god. So I already explained in part two that I think that happy is basically a god of rituals, right? And he's pouring libations instead of being the actual Nile god. But right here we see him with the fish, right? Well, he's pouring water onto the fish, whatever. So we already seen the Aquarius constellation. He's standing on the Pisces fish and stuff, right? So what is he actually doing here, right? And what does this fish actually mean as far as an Egyptian hieroglyph? Like, what does it mean? Because remember, we dealing with hieroglyphs here. So, hieroglyphs and signs and symbols, it means all kinds of different things, right? So we may be seeing a fish, the water jars and the water and stuff like that and think like, yeah, he's pouring water into a fish. That's all he's doing, whatever. But it's a hieroglyph, right? So it has some type of specific meaning to it. So let's try to find out what that actually means, yo. So here I forgot to actually bring this part up when I was talking about the southern fish, right? For example, it says the constellation there, Aquarius, right? And one of the stars whereof is Fomalhaut. We know that was the brightest star in the southern fish, right? And it says to be indicative of violence and death. I also forgot to mention this one. I had put this part right here in the Mighty Man video. Let's blow it up a little bit. So it says near Pisces is the brilliant star Fomalhaut, right? Then it says no sign in the zodiac is considered more malignant or malignant influence than this. It was deemed indicative of violence and death. It says both the Syrians and the Egyptians abstained from eating fish out of dread and abhorrence, and when the latter would represent anything of odious or express hatred by hieroglyphics, they painted a fish, right? So we just brought up happy, right? Pouring water onto a fish or whatever, right? We seen Aquarius standing on the fish. It's supposed to be basically the same constellation, whatever. We've read that Fomalhaut, right, is negative influences violence and death. We've seen the Narmer fish, right, beating the captives, right, violence, if Narmer is actually the mighty man, which is also the Pharaoh, right? We know that the mighty man is the Aquarius constellation as far as the giant is concerned. Um, right? We see these violent themes now, right? So we just read just now that, you know, the Egyptians painted a fish when it comes to like hideous stuff or violence and so on and so on, right? So let's check out the Egyptian hieroglyphs and see like what we can find in there as far as the fish is concerned. So here are some Egyptian hieroglyphs, right, in the fish category. So we have like, I guess like how they depict fishes and certain types of hieroglyphs, right, and it has its meanings and so on, right. So the interesting one that stood out to me the most is the fish that says dead body, right. So I'm saying to myself, okay, in the Egyptian hieroglyph with happy pouring water on the fish, right? How would we like relate that to anything? Like what does that actually mean? So we just see fish, right? We see fish rise, mount up, foul and filthy, fighting fish, and you know what I'm saying? We don't really know exactly what kind of fish that actually is in that hieroglyph, right? But we're talking about violence and death, right? That we just read not too long ago from Farmer Hall and the electric catfish. We seen that the fish under Aquarius foot is upside down, right? And we confirmed it that there is a fish that's actually could turn itself upside down, which is the upside down catfish, right? Now, this fish actually look like, you know, say if it's actually floating, right? Because it's dead, and I guess the tail probably like, you know, is like curving down into the water while the dead fish is floating, right? Then it says dead body. Now they could have basically just put a body, right, that just looked like it's dead, but they put a fish there instead. You see what I'm saying? So basically, by us just seeing a hieroglyph, right, and we think that is a literal like image or something, right? And we take it for what it is. Like, yeah, he's just pouring water on the fish, you know what I'm saying? But right here we have a fish that looks like it's dead, but it's called a dead body, right? And I think there's another hieroglyph that, you know, I guess by itself that mentions either the dead or the mummy. Let me check it out real quick and see. So we see these hieroglyphs, right? As far as it appears, like you see like a jar, right? You see a man, you know, leaning down, whatever. So even though we see one jar, we know that Aquarius has like two jars and such, right? Um, so it means either priests pour out water, make a libation, right? Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, man. So pretty much right here, right, we see we have vessels, right? So this kind of looks like the vessels that's actually in Happy's hand. And, well, this one doesn't have like the water coming out, right? And this one does, for example. And it says libation, jar, praise, commend, coolness, and refreshing, right? So it really depends on how, I guess, we seeing these combinations of hieroglyphs, right, coming out and so on, right? Um, so I'm not gonna say that it can mean anything, right? So we gotta ask ourselves, okay, we see the fish, we see basically vessels being used, right? Um, Now, from my understanding, I've never seen no hieroglyph, especially in this dictionary, that has anything to do with like water or river coming out of a jar, right? So, again, the concept of Aquarius being this constellation pouring out either the flood or a river and so on, right? It doesn't really seem to be the case, especially just by looking at the Egyptian god Happy. You see what I'm saying? He's pouring water onto a fish, right? So we seen that the fish can mean different things. So if we have libation jars and then we got a fish that could probably mean dead body, if we're talking about like the dead and so on, right? So maybe all this is maybe just like coinciding with each other. So this was an interesting one right here, right? And the bottom, right on the left, you see what appears to be mummies, right? Or mummy statues or something. So we got image, figure, statue, right? Mummy, transformed, dead body. And it says Sahu, right? To establish a custom. So Sahu is actually supposed to be the constellation Orion, for example, right? That's his name. And we think, or some people think, that Osiris is actually Orion, right? And then he got the name Sahu, which probably basically means mummy, right? Image, figure, statue, and so on. But I have found something very, 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 very interesting, right? And I'm gonna show you right now. So this is supposed to be, let's say Mesopotamia. Right? I'm not gonna say Babylonian because I don't know which time period this is, right? Because I only found this little piece. Well, even though it says this is in his comparison of the Greek and Babylonian zodiacs, right? So we got Ziz, right? And we got Salmu, figure. Then we know the name for Aquarius is Ghoul, right? We spoke about that in part 2 as far as it being the plant with the water um, in the jar, the canopic jars and the canopy of Peru and so on, right? You got Aquarius. So we know that Salmu actually means figure, right? But it doesn't specifically say like what kind of figure it is. So we know it's an image, right? Because that's what it also means. So according to Salmu, right? Let's see the definition real quick. Right? It's supposed to mean like visual representation, particularly an image, likeness, or statue. right? Um, so it's not particularly saying like a statue of what or image of what. It just says figure, right? In the for the Aquarius one, right? That's all the same, figure, Salmu. So we don't know for a fact if it's actually just talking about the jar as far as goo is concerned, right? Or is it actually a figure of something else that we don't know? So I was trying to figure out if, okay, like maybe if we related to the Egyptian hieroglyph, right, with the mummy, dead body, and so on, right? So basically, it's, it's a statue of a deceased person. Um, I think the mummies were actually being, because remember you got the mummies and then you got the coffin, right? Then you got the canopic jars. So I don't know if these three things were all like originally happening simultaneously. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know if like, let's just say they were just burying their dead, and then somehow they, they must have started doing like the mummy process, and then they put the organs inside the canopic jars and so on, right? So we know that Sahu is supposed to be Orion, right? They say that he's Osiris, and so on, right? But we don't really know exactly when did or who even actually said that that was supposed to be Osiris in the first place, right? And the reason why I say that is because we know that Orion in the Mesopotamian zodiac, he's called the true shepherd of Anu, right? And he's basically the one that's really supposed to be, I guess, leading the zodiac. You know what I'm saying? And from my knowledge, I don't really remember the true shepherd of Anu actually being a deceased individual or dying or anything like that. So not to say because the you know Egypt, they got their own concepts of things and it should be the same, or most of the times people say like, yeah, Egypt got these stuff from Mesopotamia, and the Greeks took it and they brought it into Egypt and so on, right? So when you see the constellation of Orion and stuff, right, you really never see him as in Egypt or as far as like Sahu, right? He's never depicted as a mummy, right? He's always on this boat. He always got his arms stretched out, and I guess he's supposed to be either stretching his hand out to Aldebaran, that's in Taurus, or something like that, right? So I don't know. It could be, maybe not, or whatever the case, right? But I just found, you know, this figure word, you know, kind of like interesting. You know what I'm saying? And be seen that the statue, you know, as far as the figure and dead body and so on, and that's what we're talking about, right? As far as what Aquarius is concerned. But let's see what else we got in here. So we also have new, a statue, image, likeness of king or god, right? Um, it's interesting because I think new in the Chinese vocabulary, you know, in the dictionary, it's supposed to either mean like a young lady or something, right? But this is actually from a Sumerian and Chinese dictionary. But I kind of clipped off the Chinese part on the right, so it basically said like the same thing, but it didn't really say anything about like a female, right? Because I guess new supposed to have like either like two dots above the U on each end of it, so that would basically like say a female, whatever. But then it's interesting because you got new Lu here, and you got like servant, right? A male, a servant, and so on, a slave. And I guess on the other side it said male plus female, whatever. So this is Sumerian, right? Um, but we still seen Samu, you know, that still had meant like image and statues and so on, right? So even though it's supposed to be like in the same area in the ancient times, the Sumerian uh, and the Babylonians, and it's interesting that, you know, the definition is basically the same, but the word is different, whatever. But you know, so I'm just basically just bringing this up, like, you know, to say like, you know, where we put these words together, right? It could create something, and you know, we get a better understanding and picture of like what's really happening here. You know what I'm saying? So we'll have to flip this upside down real quick. So this is very interesting right here too, because it says a man carried up to heaven, right? So we know this is Aquarius right here, and we got the upside down fish once again, right? So I forgot which zodiac is this, and I forgot which book I got this out of, right? But well, as you can see right here, right, it says 6,000 periods of the devil. So we know this is the what's this from Libra all the way to Aries, right? So this is the winter. See, they got it shaded and stuff like that, right? Um, so anyway, back to the Aquarius part, right? You see him as being a man carried up to heaven and stuff. The only way you being carried up to heaven is like, say you're supposed to die, right? I guess like say like a modern and Christian theologies and stuff like that, right? So you, even though he's supposed to be in the underworld, right? Because it's supposed to be the hell, right? See the winter, and then you got a man getting carried up and such like that. But remember that Ganymede got carried up. Um, who else got carried up? Jesus. You see what I'm saying? So nobody else getting carried up. Nobody else is not saying anything, right? About that, right? This is supposed to be the beginning of the evil, right? We know that it's really winter time. But specifically, they say a man carried up to heaven, right? We see the water going to the fish mouth. We know this makes absolutely no sense, right? So we got the upside down catfish that we spoke about, right? That's basically a malignant sign. We got vases, right? We seen the hieroglyphs, right? Libation and all that stuff like that, right? We seen the fish that was, I guess you could probably say it was upside down, looking just like this or whatever. Dead body. You know what I'm saying? So this right here is basically to me is telling me like, yo, it has like probably like how many themes in here? Like, you got a man, you got the libation, you got the dead body, right? If this is actually say the electric catfish, being that it's upside down, whatever the case too, right? So there's a whole bunch of things going on in this zodiac right here. You know what I mean? Then you got a man being carried up to heaven. You know what I mean? So this is gonna be part 3, man. You know, I'm not gonna drag this out too much, whatever. I'm gonna just, gather more resources and just elaborate on some of them or whatever. But yeah. I mean, it's like, what else could you actually say, really, right? Let's probably look back on some of these other things real quick. So, we basically ran through all of these, right? So we see like the violence and death concept. What else we got here? Punishment. We got libations, the vases. We got mummies. What's this? This is the Mighty Man video I was telling you about, right? So you can check that out. It's on the page, whatever. I actually got 2 YouTube channels, right? This one was supposed to be for like a different type of like channel for different things, but I just happened to just put it on here because I watch a lot of videos on this one, so being I'm always on this one, I said let me just upload at least like some of these Aquarius joints on here, whatever. But what's this right here? It's the canopic jars. Maybe we're talking about the canopic and the last what you call it. So yeah, man. The Maseroth, number 6, the man, right? The man dragging the people down into the bottomless pit, to hell, so on, supposedly. We got man getting lifted up. So, like I said before, you know what I'm saying? We got a lot of different characteristics, right? Signs and symbols and stuff like that is actually taking place here for this one, the part 3. So all you gotta do is just basically just gather up all the resources, put it where it fit, make it make sense to you, right? Because basically everything that we've seen here, like I always say, right, majority of people don't have a clue. And, not saying that they should actually have a clue or even care about it. It depends on like what you're dealing with, but there's a lot of Aquarians who really don't have a single idea like this even exists, right? They think they're just some happy or crazy, wild individual and quirky and all this nonsense, that they get from other Aquarians and other like people who do zodiac things on TikTok and Instagram and always talking about, yeah, Aquarians is always shutting down. Yeah, we shut down, right? Which, is a bad thing because you got to keep in mind that, Aquarian is supposed to be one of the four fixed signs, right? That's supposed to be actually guarding God's throne. So it's like you saying, yeah, we shut down when, whatever. That's basically saying, letting your guard down for the enemy to attack God's throne. You know what I mean? So it's like you was put there because it's like you're trusted, right? You've been entrusted to guard God's throne. You see what I mean? And then you're going to shut down when the pressure gets tough or, you know, so it's like you letting the enemy get through. You know what I'm saying? Because the four fixed signs are supposed to be the strongest signs, right? Aquarius, Scorpio, Taurus, and Leo. Right? Those are like the fiercest zodiacs out of the 12 that basically been entrusted to guard God's throne. And then every time I be looking at these things and reading comments and stuff like that, you got Aquarians always talking about, yeah, we shut down. I better knock that off. You know what I'm saying? And guard that throne. That's what you've been entrusted to do. You don't see no Scorpios and Taurus and Leos talking about, you know what I'm saying? Backing down. They don't even back down in the animal kingdom. You know what I'm saying? So Aquarius needs to stop acting weak. You know what I mean? But so I'm gonna find some more information and just elaborate on them real quick or whatever, you know. But probably might change the subject a little bit. So all you gotta do is just watch part 2. Is Aquarius God of the Underworld, right? Part 1, I actually put part 1 on there because it was just a short. It was actually the introduction. But so you only got to pay attention to that one. But as far as part 2 is concerned, yeah, watch part 2 and watch this one over if anything, and just put the pieces together. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna end it right here.